Zero shots on goal in the third period and zero answers from the coach after the game.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Monday, November 11th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode, we are going to break down the stats, storylines, and signals from an overtime loss to the Ottawa Senators on Saturday. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren, including most recently on Blue Sky. Happy Remembrance Day up here in Canada. Happy Veterans Day down in the States. Happy birthday to my mom. For those of you who are new to the podcast, again, my name is Ian. I'm a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years or so. Full-time news editor at The Score for 5 years. I've been hosting this podcast since 2019, and it hasn't been since 2006 that the Bruins achieved a feat that they replicated on Saturday night, which was going the entire third period of a hockey game without a single shot on goal. This came with the Bruins tied with the Ottawa Senators on home ice, and it's really quite unfathomable that they were not able to generate any kind of offense on Linus Ullmark in the third period of this hockey game. We'll talk about the stats more in detail later on, but in all situations in the third period, the Bruins had 5 shot attempts, 0 shots on goal. Let me repeat that. 0 shots on goal in the third period. A 12-0 shot advantage for the Senators, a 22-5 shot attempt differential. Not only did they not get any shots on goal, they fired only 5 pucks towards the net. Like, how does that even happen? And then in overtime, they had 1 attempt, 1 shot. It was stopped by Ullmark, who was able to, kick save, a beauty. Came out, Brady Tkachuk scored the other way. That was the big storyline in this one for me. 0 shots on goal in the third period. Of course, it did mark Ullmark's return to Boston after an offseason trade, an emotional return, a beautiful video tribute. There was a hug with Jeremy Swayman before the game. Kind of one last hurrah or hugga, if you will, before these two faced off in net. And let's be honest, neither of these guys has played particularly well to begin this season. In this game, however, it was Ullmark who had the upper hand and who had a much easier workload in this one. However, it was Swayman who had the better save percentage despite taking the loss. He allowed 3 goals on 34 shots for a .912 save percentage. Ullmark allowed 2 goals on 14 shots for an .875 save percentage, but again, did not face any shots in the third period. And Ty Anderson of WEEI posted a clip or a transcript of head coach Jim Montgomery after the game, who spoke for a mere 91 seconds. He was asked, why have third periods been an issue for this team? Quote, I don't have an answer. On what he'll do to figure it out. Quote, talk about it. We'll look at why and what we're doing, sports, science-wise. Right now, I don't have an answer for you. End quote. On if conditioning is an issue for the team. Quote, we thought so during camp, but we don't think so anymore. End quote. On if he questions whether or not the players are listening. Quote, no, I don't question that. End quote. And on what's preventing the messaging from getting through to the players. Quote, that's up for you guys to figure out, i.e. the media, and come with a reason. We just weren't good enough. You can write what you guys think is the malaise team and what's going on. We're just not playing good enough. Thanks. End quote. For a coach to not have any answers following a 3-2 overtime loss in which his team generated 0 shots on goal in the third period. I mean, I've been very reluctant to pin this on coaching. So far, their start, which is now kind of veering less into start territory and more into this is what this team is territory. Following that game, they're 7-2. They are third in the Atlantic in terms of overall points, but their point percentage puts them behind a bunch of other teams who have games in hand. So the Bruins can ill afford to drop points on home ice to teams that they are fighting with for a playoff spot, much less fail to generate a shot on goal in the third period. Right now, they're tied for fourth in the Atlantic with a .500 point percentage, level with the Sabres, who have a game in hand, the Senators, who have 2 games in hand, the Red Wings, not too far behind at .464. The only team that you can really write off at the moment is the Montreal Canadiens, who are well behind at .333. Boston's -12 goal differential is well entrenched in 7th at the moment. And the offense, clearly a problem for this team. You can pin it on Jim Montgomery all you want. And yes, he does take some measure of responsibility for not having any answers, for perhaps a failure to properly motivate the team or get them up or inspire them to generate at least a shot on goal in the third period. But at the same time, this is not a team that is loaded with offensive depth. And again, when key players aren't getting the job done, then I don't know who's going to come in and help turn this around for this team. You had a bunch of guys without a shot on net, including guys who are currently in the top 6. Justin Brazeau, Charlie Coyle, Tyler Johnson did not have a shot on goal despite playing a significant amount of time up with David Pastrnak and Pavel Zacha. You had not a lot generated from the back end, only 4 shots. Charlie McAvoy without a shot on goal, who's supposed to be your primary offensive driver from the back end. Yes, it was nice to see Swayman, Ullmark reunite, but there are some real questions about Jeremy Swayman's play to date, about Ullmark hasn't been very good for the Ottawa Senators either, but about the makeup of this roster. And I've been saying that over and over again. This team right now kind of is what it is. It's not a bad start. It's not necessarily that they're poorly coached, although you could argue that the constant line blending, the inability to inspire, to motivate, perhaps there's some tuning out in the room. All of it is kind of jumbled up, and it's all in the soup at the moment. And the Bruins are a .500 team. Yes, they have the talent to be better, but they've had some significant losses, especially on the wing. They did not replace them sufficiently, and there's a real lack of offensive drive and creativity on this team at the moment, and it is a big, big problem. We'll look more closely at the stats and signals to be taken away from this one, as well as take a look at what is ahead this week here as the podcast continues. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. They put their members first, so all withdrawals are safe, secure, and fast. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as fast as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, Prize Picks, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. It's live concert season, hockey season, NBA season. Get in on all the action right now with Game Time, the best ticketing app out there. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The all-in pricing can be toggled on, which means you'll get your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, and you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? It's game time. Let's get into a few more stats that you need to know following Saturday night's 3-2 overtime loss to the Ottawa Senators. And we mentioned the third period issues, specifically in this one, 0 shots on goal. Connor Ryan, Boston.com, citing a stat that through 16 games, the Bruins hold the worst third period goal differential in the NHL at -11. They're also holding the second worst third period shot differential at -41. Just unbelievable. You talk about teams getting slow starts, and the Bruins have had that happen a few times this season. In this one, it was how they finished that was kind of disturbing, let's say. Josh Norris scored at 8 seconds remaining in the third period to put this team up 1-0. A back-breaking power play goal scored against them with, who was it that was in the penalty box? Elias Lindholm taking an interference penalty against Josh Norris. The Bruins did only have 3 penalties in this one. The Lindholm one, a too many men one, served by Matt Poitras, and then Nikita Zadorov slashing Brady Tkachuk. The Bruins did respond positively in the second period with Pavel Zacha scoring. He's starting to turn things around, thankfully. Brad Marchand scored 15 seconds later to put the team up 2-1, but then they surrendered the tying goal and were not able to generate anything in the third, like literally. Overall, the shots were 34-16 in favor of the Senators, who were able to get the puck on net in the third period. And overall, the Senators completely dominated possession in this one. The shot attempts were 66-37 in favor of Ottawa. Shots were 34-16, as I mentioned. Scoring chances, 29-16. High danger chances were 7-6 in favor of Ottawa, so still a differential there. Expected goals were about 3 to 1.7. And then the final score, of course, was 3-2 in favor of Ottawa, thanks to that Brady Tkachuk goal that came after the Bruins were finally able to get a shot on goal. Linus Ullmark, he made a great save there, and the Bruins came back took it the other way. First time the Bruins have had 0 shots in the third since a game against the Vancouver Canucks in 2006, according to Kevin Ball DuPont of the Boston Globe. And key stat again, 0 answers from Jim Montgomery. Brad Marchand after the game said, sometimes when you lack confidence or you're overthinking the game, your execution is slow. We need to get out of our heads, stop thinking, just start playing. It all comes down to will and compete at this point. They need to start understanding they need to be better. Sometimes when you're thinking about where you're supposed to be, half a second late, it's too slow in this league. You heard Jim Montgomery earlier talking about how conditioning isn't the problem for this team right now. It's largely mental. And do they need a new voice in their heads? Do they need someone to come in and help turn things around in that respect? That might be the next card to be played here by management. But make no mistake, this is not just a coaching issue. It's also a team composition issue. You see the $5 million that they spent on Nikita Zadorov. You can ask whether that was a worthwhile investment so far. The answer is probably no. Elias Lindholm, he's gotten better. Yes, it takes time to acclimate to the new system, the new team, the new city, etc. But when you subtract some effective wingers from last season, like a Danton Heinen, like Jake DeBrusk, and you don't sufficiently replace them, then you're going to see cracks here. I thought perhaps Trent Frederick could develop into that Jake DeBrusk type player. He's been relegated to the fourth line, not really producing much at the moment. And the one glimmer of hope, perhaps, is that they will play the St. Louis Blues twice this week, a team that was just scored on 8 times on Saturday against the Washington Capitals. So we'll preview those games later on this week. But between that and the Dallas Stars, Jake Ottinger has not been playing very well so far this season either. Perhaps it's an opportunity to get some action against some Western Conference teams, get away from Boston, clear their heads a little, and maybe be reignited by a couple rivalry games against the St. Louis Blues. Yes, we're 5, almost 6 years removed from the Stanley Cup final. A lot of faces have changed, but there's still that X factor there of playing a team against whom you lost perhaps your last best chance at a Stanley Cup, minus, well, the 2023 or 2022 team, of course, was up there, or 2023 team, I should say. So, what can we take from these storylines, stats, the signals moving ahead? Jim Montgomery's running out of answers. And if things continue to slide and we get closer to Thanksgiving, closer to December, with the Bruins flirting with 500 or below 500, this guy does not have a contract extension. I talked last week about 5 things the Bruins can do moving forward. Make some minor roster changes, check. Trying to stay the course, check. You can make a trade, but it's much easier to fire a coach right now than to make a trade in today's NHL. That's just the way it is. I would bet that is the next piece of the puzzle for Don Sweeney, but you cannot not look at management here and put some of this on them as well. As the podcast continues, we are going to preview this week's action as well as take a look at a Czech article from NHL.com, which suggests David Pastrnak may not be fully up to speed after an injury-filled offseason. We'll touch on that here as the podcast continues. I hope you all enjoyed the NFL action over the weekend and that your bets all hit. And hopefully you are using FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of tonight's Monday night game, you can check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And it's not just for NFL action either. You can get in on the NBA, our Boston Bruins, and so much more at FanDuel.com. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you recall back in the spring, there were rumblings around the World Championship that David Pastrnak had been injured. And per NHL.com Czech edition and via Google Translate, this is from Michael Langer of NHL Czech. There's perhaps a reason why David Pastrnak is off to a bit of a slow start here. And he says in this article that he was injured for a month and a half over the summer. This was revealed via the Czech interview after the loss to the Senators. He said right now it's not so much a physical thing he's dealing with because there was still lots of time to get ready, but the problem is mainly mental. In the summer, he normally prepares for the season, and he hasn't been injured for a while. Mentally, it's hard when you can't work for a month and a half and there's nothing to do, but he is feeling better and better with each match. He celebrated the title of the World Championship with the Czech national team in Prague back in May. He had his wedding in August. Things aren't as happy as they were in the offseason. Of course, leading up to the benching that occurred not that long ago. Now, he said after the game, they didn't have much in the third period. They were driving up and down instead of holding onto the puck, getting it deep, creating some extended time in the offensive zone. We have to start working on that, getting in front of the goal, putting the puck at the right time, settle in the offensive zone. It's quite simple. We did not create enough offensively, and we weren't hungry enough to score the winning goal. He said he and Elias Lindholm, who were supposed to click together, not sure why it hasn't worked. Neither of them is satisfied with their individual performances, but they're only still getting to know each other. And I think you can't overlook that. You had these guys playing with Bergeron, Krejci for so long. You had them last year playing with Zacha and Coyle. I'm talking about Marchand and Pastrnak. You have to give them time to get acclimated. And then you throw Tyler Johnson into the mix. You put him back, Pasta with Pavel Zacha. Yeah, it's a challenge, especially when there's no consistency along the lines. And that's one big criticism against Jim Montgomery for sure. So Pasta was apparently injured in the offseason, wasn't able to get his regular training schedule. He did have the World Championship, his wedding. So perhaps he will, and hopefully he will, find his groove here sooner than later. The Bruins will be in action thrice this week, all against Western Conference opponents. They will be in St. Louis tomorrow night to take on the Blues. They will then travel to Dallas to take on the Stars on Thursday. Then they'll come home to host the Blues on Saturday afternoon. We will preview all three of those games on the podcast coming up this week. We're also going to look at the Eastern Conference power rankings, the cup check on Thursday. Hopefully the Bruins are able to move it up a bit, and hoping to get some other voices on the podcast here soon. I am in between full-time jobs at the moment, which is kind of something I was alluding to last week, a bit of a rough week, but we're pressing on, and hopefully we can generate some great stuff here on Locked On Boston Bruins, even though this team is struggling a little bit. So 3 games coming up this week, 2 at 8 p.m. if you're on the East Coast. So have to stay up a little bit later. But again, shout out to all the veterans out there. Happy Remembrance Day. Happy Veterans Day. Happy birthday to my mom, who is recovering today from latest cancer treatment. We think of all the people who are going through that as well. There's so much going on in this world in our own lives personally. But it's so great to be able to just spend some time talking about our favorite hockey team, even if they're struggling a little bit. My family is in Ottawa. They're all Sens fans. I'm sure they were happy with the outcome on Saturday night. And we take joy wherever we can get it this season. It was great to see Allmark, Swayman together again. And we can't discount the fact that they were so tight. They remain so tight. It's got to be difficult to be separated like this, playing with a new backup each and getting to know those guys while also, keeping in touch and not wanting to have that relationship fade because of hockey circumstances. Life is bigger than the game. There's more to life than hockey. It's a positive, hopefully, distraction for us, but there's so many things more important: family, freedom, our countries, all this kind of stuff. Anyways, kind of a heavy way to end today's podcast, but I thank you again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube if you have not already, and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast next. Become a fantasy expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. It's available on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, and it's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Happy Monday, friends. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins.